The galaxy had always spoken their name with fear. The Wraith Dominion were the apex predators of the stars, tall, obsidian-skinned titans with jaws like serrated blades and a history written in blood. They conquered worlds not for resources, but for dominance. They didn't enslave lesser species. They hunted them, left their bones on scorched worlds as a reminder of who ruled the void. For thousands of years, the Wraith were the uncontested alpha race. Until they came across a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star. The year was 2159. The United Terran Coalition had just established their first interstellar colonies beyond Alpha Centauri. Humanity had barely begun to understand its place in the galaxy when the Wraith appeared without warning. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the UTCS Resolute, his jaw tense as the tactical screen filled with red icons. The Wraith fleet had dropped out of FTL above Europa Prime, the first fully terraformed colony in human space. "Status report," Cole demanded, his voice hard but calm. "Wraith fleet is moving into attack formation," Lieutenant Maria Hensley replied, her fingers dancing over the console. 20 capital ships. Hundreds of strike craft. They're broadcasting. The screen flickered, cutting her off. An image appeared, a towering Wraith warlord, his armor engraved with the skulls of species long forgotten. His yellow eyes gleamed with hunger. "Humans," the warlord's voice boomed, deep and resonant. "Your world is ours. Your species will be called. Your name erased. This is the way of the Alpha." The transmission ended as suddenly as it began. Cole exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the railing. "So that's their version of diplomacy," he muttered. Then, louder, "battle stations. Lock shields, charge rail batteries, and scramble every fighter we've got." The crew moved with silent efficiency, but the tension was palpable. Humanity had fought wars before, brutal ones, but this was different. The Wraith weren't here to negotiate or to conquer for gain. They were here to wipe humanity out entirely. The first volley came like thunder. Wraith plasma cannons tore through the void, burning bright against the Resolute's shields. The deck shuddered violently. Sparks showered from a nearby console as systems overloaded. "Shields at 65%. Maria shouted. Cole didn't flinch. "Return fire." The Resolute's railguns spat slugs of tungsten at hypersonic speed. Several Wraith frigates erupted into fireballs, their twisted hulls tumbling into the void. But for every ship they took down, 5 more closed in. "Captain, we can't hold this line forever," said Commander Jason Ward, his second in command. Cole's eyes narrowed. "We don't need to hold it forever. Just long enough for the colony transports to escape." On the surface of Europa Prime, evacuation sirens howled. Dr. Claire Morgan, the chief xenobiologist stationed on the colony, clutched her daughter's hand as they sprinted toward the last transport shuttle. The skies above were lit with streaks of fire, atmospheric re-entry trails from burning wreckage. "Mommy, what's happening?" little Ella cried. Claire forced her voice to stay calm. It's just a storm, sweetheart. We're getting to a safer place." But as they reached the shuttle, a massive shadow swept across the ground. Claire looked up and froze. A Wraith war beast descended from the sky, its armor bristling with blades, its roar shaking the earth. Human Marines opened fire, rifles blazing. The creature's height absorbed most of the shots, but it stumbled just enough for Claire to push Ella onto the shuttle ramp. A Marine grabbed Claire's arm and hauled her aboard just as the beast charged, and the shuttle's thrusters roared, lifting them into the air. Through the viewport, Claire watched the colony burn. Back in orbit, the Resolute was taking a beating. Hull breaches were reported across decks 5 through 8. Life support was failing in multiple sections. "Captain," Maria said quietly, "if we don't break through now, we're going down with this ship." Cole looked around at his bridge crew. They were battered, bloodied, but unbroken. "No," he said. "We're not dying here. Bring the experimental drive online." Jason turned to him, stunned. "Sir, that thing hasn't been tested." "Then today's the test," Cole snapped. "Do it." The Resolute's engines began to hum with a strange, unnatural vibration. The ship's frame groaned as power surged through its core. Course set for maximum kinetic impact, Maria reported. Target, Wraith flagship. Cole's lips pressed into a grim line. All hands, brace for ramming speed. The Resolute turned, engines flaring brighter than a newborn star, and hurled itself straight at the massive Wraith dreadnought dominating the battle. The collision lit the void like a second sun. The Resolute's experimental drive overloaded, releasing a shockwave that tore through the Wraith fleet. Ships were shredded, armor plates peeled away, and the once invincible formation broke apart in chaos. When the light faded, both the Resolute and the Wraith flagship were gone, reduced to debris scattered across the stars. But the colony transports had escaped. Humanity had survived its first encounter with the so-called Alpha race. And somewhere, in the dark silence after the battle, the Wraith realized something they had never considered before. The prey had teeth. The debris field of the Resolute drifted in silence. Twisted metal, shattered armor, and frozen bodies floated in orbit above Europa Prime, grim monuments to the first battle of the Human-Wraith War. On the bridge of the UTCS Vanguard, Admiral Sarah Donovan stared at the tactical display with an expression of cold fury. "Confirm the casualty report," she said, her voice flat. "Confirmed, Admiral," replied Commander Raj Patel, his face pale. "The Resolute was lost with all hands. 40% of our escort fleet destroyed. Europa Prime's surface colonies are gone." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Donovan spoke. "Then we make them pay." 2 months later, the United Terran Coalition was no longer the same fledgling power the Wraith had encountered. Humanity's industry had gone into overdrive. Shipyards glowed around Mars and Titan, cranking out warships at a pace unseen since the Resource Wars. Military enlistment surged as millions of men and women signed up, their faces hard with vengeance. And at the heart of it all was Donovan. She stood at the head of the newly formed Terran Defense Armada, a coalition of every surviving fleet group, every combat-ready ship humanity possessed. "This is not just a war for territory," Donovan told the assembled commanders during a briefing aboard the Vanguard. "This is a war for our existence. The Wraith don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They don't stop until every trace of a species is gone. We are either going to end them, or we are going to be erased from history." Her words hung in the air, electric. The first strike came at the Wraith forward base orbiting a dead world near Gliese 581. 3 Terran battlecruisers jumped into the system and immediately opened fire with mass drivers and missile swarms. The Wraith garrison barely had time to scramble fighters before the Terran ships unleashed a new weapon, the Thor-class kinetic penetrator, a tungsten rod accelerated to a fraction of lightspeed. The impact split the Wraith station in half. The blast wave incinerated anything within 100 kilometers. For the first time in their history, the Wraith experienced something they had never felt: shock. But the Wraith were not passive victims. Across the galaxy, their war machine stirred. Entire breeding worlds were converted to churn out soldiers and war beasts. Fleets larger than any ever recorded began massing on the frontiers. The next major engagement came at Kepler Gate, a strategic wormhole hub linking human space to 3 Wraith sectors. Donovan herself commanded the Vanguard at the heart of the fleet. "Enemy fleet approaching," Admiral Raj reported. Reading: 50 capital ships, 200 escorts. Donovan's eyes narrowed. This was it, the first real test of the Terran Armada. "Deploy all squadrons," she ordered. "Bring the Ragnarok guns online." The battle was apocalyptic. Terran carriers spewed clouds of fighters that swarmed the Wraith formation like hornets. Point defense guns stitched the darkness with streams of fire, cutting down enemy craft. The Vanguard's spinal-mounted mass driver fired, punching through a Wraith dreadnought with a single shot and leaving it to vent atmosphere as it drifted lifeless. But the Wraith fought back with savage ferocity. Their boarding pods smashed into Terran hulls, disgorging towering warriors with plasma halberds. Corridor by corridor, deck by deck, Marines fought them in brutal close-quarters combat. Commander Jason Ward, somehow surviving the destruction of the Resolute thanks to a last-minute evacuation pod, led one of these counter-boarding actions personally. "Seal bulkhead Delta," he barked, his pulse rifle bucking as he fired down the hall. A Wraith warrior collapsed, ichor spraying across the deck. Push forward. Clear them out. Ward's squad advanced methodically, room by room, until the last Wraith lay dead. When the smoke cleared, the Terran fleet still held the gate. The cost was high, hundreds of ships lost, tens of thousands dead, but the Wraith assault force was annihilated. After the battle, Donovan stood on the observation deck of the Vanguard, looking out at the ruined husks of Wraith ships drifting in the void. They thought they were the apex predators, she said quietly. They thought they could erase us. But now they know what it feels like to bleed. Ward stood beside her, still wearing scorched armor from the boarding action. Ma'am, with respect, they're going to come back. And next time, they won't hold anything back. Donovan's expression hardened. Good, she said. Neither will we. What came next was no longer a defensive war. Terran strike groups began raiding deep into Wraith territory, targeting shipyards, breeding pits, and command hubs. They moved like ghosts, hitting hard and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Word spread across the galaxy: humanity, the upstart species from Sol, had done the unthinkable. They had bloodied the Wraith Dominion and lived to tell the tale. And in the shadows, other species, ones that had lived in terror of the Wraith for centuries, began to take notice. By the end of that year, the war had transformed into something bigger than anyone expected. This was no longer a single-species fight for survival. This was a galactic reckoning. And the humans were just getting started. The galaxy had changed. Where once the Wraith Dominion's name inspired fear, now it inspired hope that they could be defeated. Across a dozen star systems, enslaved species rose up, emboldened by Terran victories. Their rebellions spread like wildfire. And at the heart of it all, Admiral Sarah Donovan was preparing the final strike, the campaign that would decide the fate of two civilizations. She stood in the Vanguard's war room, its holographic display projecting a rotating image of Wraith Prime, the enemy's homeworld. Its blackened surface was scarred by millennia of conquest, its skies choked with war factories and orbital citadels. This is where it ends, Donovan said to the assembled commanders. The Wraith believe they are the natural rulers of the galaxy. They believe no one can challenge them. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. We are going to prove them wrong. Operation Extinction Protocol began with the largest fleet movement in human history. Over 1,000 Terran warships mustered near Proxima, their drives burning bright as they formed up. Carriers, battleships, frigates, and dreadnoughts stretched as far as the eye could see. Entire swarms of fighters and drones drifted in holding patterns like a storm waiting to break. Commander Jason Ward stood on the Vanguard's bridge, looking at the display with a mixture of awe and grim determination. God help the Wraith when this hammer falls, he muttered. God help us if we fail, Lieutenant Maria Hensley replied softly, her hands steady on the tactical console. Donovan's voice cut through the tension. Fleet, jump on my mark. And remember, no quarter. The jump into the Wraith home system was like plunging into hell. The sky over Wraith Prime was alive with warships, thousands of them, their formations stretching from orbit to the edge of the system. The Dominion had gathered every remaining ship it could muster. This was not just a battle. It was extinction. Contact across the board. Raj Patel shouted. They're locking on every ship we have. Donovan's jaw tightened. Then we hit them first. Fire everything. The battle that followed was beyond comprehension. The void was torn apart by the fury of two civilizations. Terran Ragnarok cannons unleashed slugs the size of skyscrapers, tearing through Wraith Titans. Orbital platforms shattered under coordinated missile barrages. Wraith capital ships charged headlong into the Terran line, spewing boarding pods and plasma storms. Whole human cruisers were bisected in single strikes. On the Vanguard, damage reports poured in. Bulkheads failed. Fire suppression teams worked in zero gravity as plasma fires ate through decks. And yet, the Terran fleet did not break. Jason Ward led another brutal boarding action, this time against the Wraith High Command's flagship. The corridors were narrow, the air hot and reeking of blood and ozone. The Wraith defenders were monstrous, but the Marines pressed forward with disciplined ferocity. Ward's pulse rifle clicked empty. He drew his combat knife and drove it into a Wraith warrior's throat, twisting hard before shoving the body aside. "Bridge is ahead," he shouted to his squad. "Move." They breached the command deck in a storm of gunfire. When the smoke cleared, the Wraith High Warlord lay sprawled on the deck, a hole in his chest. Ward activated his comm admiral. The Dominion's command ship is neutralized. On the Vanguard's bridge, a hush fell. Donovan allowed herself the faintest of smiles. "Transmit this across all open channels," she ordered. "Let every Wraith hear this, their Alpha is dead." What followed was not a retreat, it was a slaughter. With their command structure gone, the Wraith fleet dissolved into chaos. Terran warships cut through them like a scythe through wheat. Then came the final order. "Commence planetary bombardment," Donovan said, her voice cold as steel. Thor-class projectiles rained from orbit. Massive shockwaves rippled across Wraith Prime. Entire continents cracked under the kinetic strikes. The world that had once ruled the stars burned until its surface was glass. There would be no recovery. No rebuilding. The Wraith were gone. When the guns finally fell silent, the Terran fleet hung over the shattered world like gods. On the observation deck, Donovan stood with Ward and Maria, watching the fires still burning below. "It's over," Maria whispered. "No," Donovan said quietly. "It's just begun. The galaxy will remember this day, the day the prey became the predator." Ward turned to her. "And if anyone else thinks they're the next Alpha?" Donovan's eyes were like ice. "Then we remind them of Wraith Prime." In the centuries that followed, the name Wraith faded from history. No monuments marked their passing. No songs remembered their glory. Humanity had not just defeated them, they had erased them. And somewhere, deep in the cold of space, the stars seemed to burn a little brighter, as if bearing witness to the rise of a new Alpha race.